All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start our React Andy segment for this evening, friends. We're gonna be starting with a homie we've not reacted to in quite some time, a homie that actively watches us and loves our stuff, which I appreciate so much because Mintskull themselves is a very excellent content creator themselves. So the fact that they watch my stuff is very, very hits me in the heart. But we're gonna be looking at their video today, talking about how DBD is not beginner friendly. So now more than ever, especially since they're a friend of the channel, make sure you get that link that just showed up in the Twitch chat. If you are on YouTube in the future, it'll be down in the description below. Let's go ahead and see what Tommy has to say about it.
Anytime a new patch of Dead by Daylight comes out, is that the game is becoming more noob friendly, and that the developers are catering to the casual player
I hear this so often
instead
now.
of caring about the veterans that invested thousands of hours into the game. Some examples of these changes include the simplification of flashlight saves, a once impressive feat of skill that can now be
We were talking
done
about this
by
earlier.
your average Joe, or the removal
That flashlight change, that's single-handedly maybe just like despise going against flashlights. I used to actually pretty much enjoy going against flashlights because if they got a really, really cool save, I was like, oh, okay, awesome. But not like 9 times out of 10 somebody gets a save on me, it's because of the extra buffer and not because they actually hit the timing correctly. It just doesn't feel good.
removal of certain text from killer powers that make them simpler to play and with less depth, like Chucky's Flicks or the soon-to-come Hog Tech removal from the Blight. Or how about the unexpected buff that the Huntress received?
I don't know why they buffed Huntress still. It's so odd.
Was strong enough with a buff that seems catered to beginner players that miss a lot of hatchets. Think of Dead by Daylight as a line, where the left side belongs to the new players with the lower skill ceiling of the game, and the right side belongs to the veterans and absolute top of the skill ceiling. What Behavior is doing in order to make the game easier for casuals is to cut from the right side of this line, by removing cool text and simplifying the gameplay aspect of Dead by Daylight.
I can't wait for Tommy's video talking about how new players are more important.
Right side of this line and become good.
Because I'm wondering if that will
them,
have some extra context with this video.
These are indeed great, but for the players that are on the right, these changes just remove part of the fun and depth of Dead by Daylight, making the game easier to play and thus more stale. And this is my entire issue with the game and the reason I am making this video. The problem that casuals and new players have is not the fact that the Huntress is too hard to play or that the Blight is too strong and needs the hook text to be removed. The true issue that beginners and casuals face in Dead by Daylight is the severe lack of in-game tools that explain gameplay mechanics to beginners, the massive grind or
Where in Dead by Daylight, and any, like, not like the community, where in the game of Dead by Daylight does it tell you that in order to solve the box against Pinhead, you gotta dodge a change first? Where in the game does it tell you in order to solve the box against Pinhead, you have to dodge a chain first? Where? There is so much stuff that's like crucial to understanding the game that just isn't there. And DBD itself does a very, very poor job of explaining things that it does explain. Another perfect example in the Xenomorph. There is an add-on that uses the term vents. What are the vents? I don't know. The official power calls it control stations. That's their official verbiage in the Xenokai, true. And the official power, they're called control stations. And then the tunnels are called the tunnels. So what the heck is a vent? I don't know. It's in an add-on description, so it's terrible. Like everything is so bare bones and sometimes outright confusing. Like they do such a poor job of, like, for lack of a better term, keeping their shit together with this stuff.
or paywall regarding perks that doesn't incentivize gameplay.
That paywall video is still one of your best videos, by the way. So I know you watch my stuff. Still one of your best videos.
What was once a fun game into a competitive sweatfest. Today, I will shed light into a topic that not many players even care about and show how truly bad the new player experience is for Dead by Daylight. Let's start with the biggest problem this game has, in my opinion, and that's the fact that the tools given in-game in order to learn the gameplay are very lacking. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that Dead by Daylight is a very hard game to understand.
It's not.
The core gameplay is pretty simple. As a survivor,
That's why it's incredibly funny to me that so many people get egos about Dead by Daylight, because compared to any other FPS or fighting game or any other online versus game, it is tremendously easy. Like, like laughably easy. So the fact that people get egos about it is just super cringe.
you have to repair 5 generators with your teammates in order to power the exit gates, open them, and escape the trial, all while avoiding the killer, who will want to catch you, hang you on sacrificial hooks, and prevent you from repairing the gens and escaping the trial. Compared to more strategic games, for example MOBAs like League of Legends, or shooters that require a lot of mechanical
I just
skill,
said that!
like
Woo!
Valorant or Counter-Strike, it's clear that
Counter? I don't even know her.
is simpler to understand and requires less mechanics in order to be good at. This is why it makes it so enjoyable to watch streams of it, because any viewer, even the newer ones, will easily understand the core gameplay of Dead by Daylight. The problem, and many of you will agree, is that if you have invested a lot of hours into the game, the description I said earlier about Dead by Daylight is an oversimplification of the actual gameplay we have, and while mechanically speaking, Dead by Daylight is not as demanding compared to the vast majority of competitive games, a skill set that you absolutely need in order to perform well is to have knowledge, and in Dead by Daylight you need a lot of it, but the only way to get this knowledge is by the hard way, which is constantly losing until you learn how to play as or against a killer.
And this is the problem I think most players with DBD have, is just because they don't want to go through this period of just losing a lot to understand what they're doing wrong. Because the game has so much RNG nature to it and so much misbalance in the game, or lack of balance in general rather, they just kind of want to just anytime they lose just go, yep, it's lack of balance, oh yep, it's just the RNG, and they just throw their hands up in the air. And they never want to lose to get better. And that's just like, it just creates such a nasty situation of people that just like cry way too much because they just don't want to lose to learn. Or if they don't take the game that seriously, lose to not be in a sweaty bracket. Like, I don't know. Can't have your cake and eat it too.
Something that is not fun for the majority of the player base, or by taking a look into guides from content creators or the wiki, which means you have to go.
I wrote one of those about a cool little guy called the Xenomorph. Should check that out.
Go outside of the game to learn it. In my opinion, a great game is that which explains everything you need to know inside of it, and you don't have to enter a website.
Do you know how many different numbers and stuff are across so many different pages for the Xenomorph? There's stuff on the Xenomorph official wiki. There's stuff on the movement speed page, which is very hard to find. There's stuff on the flame turret page. There's like the info for the Xenomorph is all over the place. It's on like 3 or 4 different pages on the wiki if you want to get like a full understanding of the character. Thankfully, my guide has it all in one place. Thankfully. Once again, that's not in-game, and that's not even like the wiki. Like, even in the wiki, it's like, like 4 different areas. I'm like, why? Why, dude? Much less the game itself. The game itself doesn't explain darn near anything. You just stop playing? Yeah, it's the fact that the information is so spread out, if there at all, is ridiculous.
Or watch content creators in order to learn the basics. Dead by Daylight only offers 3 tools in order to help new players learn the game: an in-game
That's so bare bones
tutorial, a game manual section that contains most gameplay elements in text format, and the character select screen. Let's break down each of them to see just how bad they are, starting with the in-game tutorial. This survivor tutorial starts
by teaching
you basic controls, like walking,
just practice it in this little circle here with Dwight,
and vaulting, as well as the basics of repairing a generator and hitting skill checks. After that, you are shown the power of the Trapper, a killer that can place bear traps around the map to catch you. Once you're picked up by the killer, Meg will drop down a pallet in order to save you, and this is where the problems begin. Once you advance...
Listen, Chucky is still my least favorite character to face in the game. Like, I understood the footstep thing. So many people don't even know that's the thing, and it's very funny.
The game tells you to drop down a pallet for no reason before continuing with the tutorial, which just teaches new survivors to waste pallets once you see the killer instead of saving them to stun them and make chases last longer. A survivor might think that they have to pre-drop pallets in order to make the killer waste time by breaking them. But
this is really funny because like this is like I forget what they're called. I think it's called a bell curve, right? It's like you start low with like pre-dropping pallets because I'm scared to like, okay, we're gonna loop the pallet as much as possible to get as much value as possible, and then you go back down to some killers have such strong anti-chase that we're gonna have to pre-drop to counterplay them. It's like you go up and then back down.
that's not true for the vast majority of cases. After wasting a pallet, you are told to save Meg and then proceed to hide inside a locker, which is problem number 2, as lockers are some of the biggest noob traps in the game, and this is already teaching them bad habits. I find it funny how even in the tutorial, hiding inside a locker is useless since the killer finds you either way. So why not teach survivors that there are better things to do rather than hide in a locker with your teammate after unhooking? Why not teach them to run or do generators instead? However, something I do like is that they updated the tutorial in order to include the anti-base
Yeah, it is weird they don't
camping
bring up the basement.
mechanic,
I didn't even think
so
about that,
new
Stinky.
players at least know that it exists. After getting saved by
Yeah, the
Meg
tutorial
and
looks really pretty. I do
explaining
like it a
you how
lot.
to heal others, you repair a generator with Meg and open the exit gates, after which the game also teaches you the mechanic of the hatch. I think the hatch is an important mechanic to explain to new players, but I also find it interesting how the existence of the hatch might promote new players to just hide until your teammates are dead so you can get the hatch. It might be personal bias, but at the very least, I remember my solo queue games like that way back when I started playing in 2016, when
It's a
you
good
had
day,
to
White
repair
Coastal. What's
2
up?
generators in order to spawn the hatch. But going back to the tutorial, that's it. There is no mention of the different types of items that survivors can equip in the match. I am sure many of us thought that maps would literally show a
That is
map
true.
of
I
the
didn't think
hatch
about that.
so you know where generators are or the chests, which are also missing from the tutorial completely. There is zero mention
There should
of
be
the
like, ideally, there should be like multiple tutorials. Like step 1, basic. Step 2, extra objective. Step 3, there's multiple. And it should like go up. That's how it should be.
mechanic with toolboxes, and how hooks are repaired after a short time, or how keys can be used to open up the hatch. I bet some players actually think that flashlights are used in order to light up the map in case it's too dark, instead of it being used as an aggressive item against the killers. Behavior could have implemented a section where you search inside a chest in order to find a flashlight that would later be used to blind the killer, so it teaches you 2 things: what chests
Ooh.
are
Oh,
and
that's
how
still
they
hit.
work,
Wow,
and how
that's
to
crazy.
use flashlights. Instead, what the tutorial teaches you is to waste a pallet down while the killer is busy carrying your teammate. There is also no mention of the various
Yeah, you
status
just have to
effects
read
that
about
can
'em.
hinder you in a match. For example, your aura being revealed, blindness, exposed, hindered, none of that. Raise your hand if you also thought that exposed meant that the killer could see you way back when you started playing. The game
Yeah,
does
it's not
teach you
really-
about the resolve mechanic,
Not really
which is
good,
the anti-face camp mechanic,
explanation.
but it doesn't
Acronym.
teach you about endurance, the effect you get once you escape from a hook, and that getting hit while you have endurance will give you the deep
I just mentioned
wound
the tutorials at the
status
very end,
effect,
yeah.
which, if you don't mend yourself, you are gonna go down. Something that I bet your beginner friends probably had trouble with when they started playing. What is worse is that the game incentivizes you to heal Meg, your rescuer, as part of the healing tutorial.
Instead of having
But
her
that
heal
will
you.
only remove the endurance status effect you get
Yeah.
after unhooking, and it's one of the biggest mistakes you can do. Anytime you are unhooked, the game should incentivize you to either leave the hook or let yourself get healed by the rescuer. What this section should have done is mention that there are conspicuous actions that will remove your endurance anytime you repair a generator or interact with any of the other survivors. There is also no mention of totems. which is something that appears
Yeah, it's not
in
many.
every single match in Dead by Daylight. The game doesn't mention anything about hexes, and the fact that there are 5 totems around the map that could potentially host hex perks, some of the strongest perks a killer can use. There is also no mention of the boons mechanic at all, but this is an issue we will talk about in a later part of this video.
I saw that.
However, no one escapes death.
What are you
is
using,
a
Nito?
problem for a lot of new players, and it's a free perk, so the argument of hexes being too advanced is not right. How about showing in the endgame section that the Trapper bot has hex, no one escapes death? This way, the survivors are shown how important some perks can be, what the exposed status effect is and how strong it is, and the survivors are taught about the existence of hex totems and how to deal with them. And possibly the worst offender is...
Let's be real here. The real reason, I'll say it, the real reason that there's not multiple tutorials and the tutorials aren't more in-depth is because if they added another tutorial to talk about like hex totems and, you know, flashlights and that sort of thing, Xenomorph's tail would stop working. Or a map would just need to be kill switched because somebody's spawning a pallet straight through a wall or something like that. That's why.
The Trapper section. The game doesn't teach you at all that you can close down Trapper's bear traps or save your teammates from one in case they are stuck. There is zero guidance for new players in order to help them in chases, for all they know is that the bear traps are very dangerous and that you should throw down pallets outside of a chase to slow down the killers as well as hide in lockers.
They do the Bethesda route, just let our community do it.
Teach you that you can close down the bear traps so survivors are not scared of interacting with them.
And that's what I hate so much about the DBD community in general, is like, because of that, people funnel into content creators for their education. Content creators are either like not too well informed themselves, so they give wrong information, or they're super biased and give vaguely correct information, but there's like a curve to it that's like not true or exaggerated because they're trying to like, you know, prove their point, prove their tribalism, which is that.
Trapper puts a bear trap under a pallet, you can throw it down to vault it. This way, you teach the players 2 things. As Trapper, don't put your traps under pallets, and as a survivor, it already teaches you a smart counterplay against the killer that adds some depth to the gameplay. The tutorial could present you with a choice to either close the trap or to put a pallet down. I hope this breakdown shows you that the survival tutorial is
teachable from Jeff Johansson
and fails at teaching some core aspects of the game, to the point that it actually teaches some bad things to newer players, and the only true way to learn the game is by either watching guides on the internet, have a friend teach you while you play, or find out the hard way once you are inside a match. If this is the first experience a new player gets when playing Dead by Daylight, no wonder it's so easy to win as a killer in low MMR. And in fact, the difference in skill
still being 10 meters of 4.8
picks up the game.
You know, I got told I was being way too mean about that.
Has watched a guide or someone.
I was like, don't point it out. That's making fun of them.
Severe that it can lead to solo players being frustrated that their teammates have zero idea of what they are doing. After all, again, the tutorial teaches you to throw down a pallet randomly. So is it really your clueless teammates' fault? And if you thought that the survivor tutorial was bad, let's just take a look at the killer side now. The killer tutorial begins with the Trapper, and you already
You're right, the maps for the tutorial are always so
first person instead of the third view camera from survivors. It tells you about the basics and that you should go to generators in order to prevent survivors from repairing them, which is great. It also teaches you of loud explosions when missing skill checks and how to kick generators.
Actual, not feelings based? Nope, I was being too mean apparently.
Tutorial, and that is the fact that there is
I've come to realize that, like, see no stuff! Using the right add-ons too. Not a bad build. Kind of almost using Otz's build. Otz's build is Labyrinth star map, crew, headset, and then eruption instead of lethal. I feel I've come to realize that just like the Dead by Daylight community, like, I'm never this guy, right? I always try to be empathetic as possible, but I feel like the Dead by Daylight community is just like incredibly sensitive. Like incredibly sensitive. like I can like if somebody says something really just factually incorrect, super wrong, and I laugh about it, like I'm being so mean and terrible and condescending. It's like it's just funny. It's really, really funny. Like it genuinely gets a laugh out of me, but I gotta like I don't know, hide the humor I can find in that, because like you're gonna take it like, oh wow, he's just laughing at me because he hates me and he's just a mean big bully. Like it's not what it is. If somebody like this is kind of retreading that video I made, but it's like if you come up to me and be like 2 + 2 is 7, I'm like, okay. They're like, did you just chuckle? Did you chuckle? Are you making fun of me? It's like, yeah. No, it was funny because that's not true. What do you mean? Well, you could have just phrased it better, you know? I'm like, I just chuckled, man. Relax. Like the community is just so intense and volatile for no reason. Gosh, they're wild.
Mechanic, where kicking the same generator many times will eventually lead it to it being blocked by the entity. This is a very important mechanic.
People don't still understand this mechanic. Yeah, every single time when I use kick builds on Xenomorph, there's so many times I still have like 3 or 4 more kicks on a gen, and then like you guys in chat will be like, oh, it's blocked, you can't kick it anymore. Uh-oh, it's blocked, you can't kick it anymore. And I just walk up and kick it, and I kind of just like kind of look at you a bit. So yeah, that's just true.
Any killer player will find during
Always
their
expecting the
matches,
worst, true.
and it can be
Very,
very
true.
confusing for someone that has no idea about it. Next up, you are thought about the mechanics of scratch marks, fast bold noises, as well as a small chase with Meg. It teaches you that if you get hit by a pallet, you will get stunned. However, the way it presents it to you suggests that it's better to stay at the pallet and try to stun the killer rather than loop the killer around the pallet to make them waste more time. After that, they tell you to place down a bear trap, but they do it in some of the most basic ways I have ever seen. There is no mention of picking up your bear traps around the map, or how to reset bear traps that are disarmed, and no mention of the fact that if you get caught by a bear trap yourself, you will get stunned, and if you carry a survivor, they will escape. To play devil's advocate, one can argue that this is the killer's tutorial and not a trapper specific one, so let's just ignore this for now. After that, the game teaches you how to injure survivors with basic attacks, the downside of being injured, and how to pick up a survivor to hook them. Despite the bot not wiggling, the game does make it clear that you need to be quick and hook them, or else they can escape your grasp. However, the game doesn't teach you that you can also drop survivors down in case there are no hooks around, and that each time you drop them, there is some progress added to the wiggle
that's a pretty
bar.
important mechanic just to
Once
pass
you
up.
hook Meg, the game reminds you
I'm
again
6
that
months
if you
in.
stay close to a hook
You're just like,
survivor, they can escape.
shit.
the hook.
You're just like
The game teaches
tailgating
you to
this guy
close
from
the
like 10
hatch,
years away. That's
and
really
the
funny.
tutorial ends with Jake being trapped
I gotta
by the
get him.
bear trap you
I
set
gotta get him.
earlier, so you hook them.
That's fun.
But have you noticed something? The tutorial is over, yet there was no mention of breaking walls,
Xeno stuff.
a mechanic that as of now
That's a good
only
build.
killers can interact with.
That was
What
an
is
excellent build.
weirder is that even in the survivor tutorial, you can see the bot trapper breaking down a wall in order to catch you, which I find to be a very cool detail. There is also no mention of the basement.
Yeah, we were talking about
which is
there. Where'd the
weird,
basement go?
Because I remember in a past tutorial, the game actually talked about how dangerous it can be. Something I heavily dislike about both the tutorials is that they do not mention how long each hook stage lasts, which is super important to know.
Do you know how many people get it like thousands of hours into the game and don't know this? That's why all your randoms are saving like immediately, because they have no concept of how long the hook states are. Like 0. That's why people farm so much. That's why people unhook so urgently. Is because they get like thousands of hours deep into the game and don't know that you can let somebody cook for a while. And it's not that big of a deal.
Know as a survivor, as it will let you know how long you have in order to save your friends. Both of the bots instantly die the moment they are hooked, and I understand not wanting to wait for the full duration, but at least explain it or mention it somewhere. There is no explanation of the different items
there are a
survivors
minute,
can use against you, like flashlights or toolboxes. There is no mention of the endurance status effect that survivors get after you
Nope.
hit them after unhooking, which can confuse some new players as to why a survivor didn't go down when injured. No mention of how those pesky survivors can disarm your bear traps, so you should place them in smarter ways. It's a very lacking tutorial for a very brutal, competitive game where each bit of information is crucial in order to survive or sacrifice. However, there is still one saving grace for the tutorial of the game, and that is the game manual. I am more of a show, don't tell kinda guy, but either way, let's just see how effective the game manual is. The game manual is a section of the game that I am sure not many players even know it exists. Instead of selecting the tutorials, you go to the top part to find it. It is divided into 3 categories: the game, the survivors, and the killers, and I won't be analyzing it too much just for the sake of brevity. However, what I will point out is that this game manual is very lacking too. While it does a good job at explaining some of the things that are not explained in the tutorial, this is still just too much text without any examples provided for new players.
In the Xeno guide, there is a visual reference for almost every section. Almost every. That's why another reason the guide is fairly long. There's a visual aid for almost every single section because I want you to see what I'm talking about. Here and there, I don't put one because I think it's just not complicated enough to really put a GIF there or an image there. It's pretty straightforward. But like 95% of the things that are in the guide have some sort of visual aid to accompany them because people need to see what you're talking about. If I can do it, what's your excuse as the official owners of the game? What is your excuse?
I think instead of this tutorial just being text, a certain animation or GIF or even an image should be shown in order to make it more helpful for newer players. Like show the aura of a survivor behind a wall, show how a scorch hook looks like, or show the obsession icon on the hood. But even then, the game manual lacks some absolutely crucial information that new players need to know, and there is no excuse as to why these things are missing from the manual. For example, let's talk about the anti-face camping mechanic, which was explained in the tutorial.
That was a really good one.
If you want to read about it to find out, for example, how big the radius is or how long it takes to fully fill, you can't, because the only mention of this mechanic is done in the in-game section of the manual and not the hook sections of each respective role. I also want to point out that at no point in the entire manual or tutorial does it explain that the anti-face cam mechanic does not work in the endgame, so a killer might not know that you actually can and should protect your hook in the endgame to at least get a sacrifice.
That's really good, Beast.
The tutorial doesn't even talk about items and what they do. There is no section that quickly goes over each item, unlike with the status effects. Again, just like with the in-game tutorial, there is zero mention of the anti-3-gen mechanic, so unless you watch Oddsdarva, visit the wiki, or get told by a friend, you won't know what the orange spikes are when you break a generator. In the stealth, avoid getting detected section, the manual tries to mention all the ways a killer can find you when you're trying to hide, but there is no mention of the killer instinct mechanic at all.
That's not good.
Killer instinct is not mentioned in the killer section either, and this is
so bad.
Important for survivors to know, especially the newer ones, as killer instinct is the only tracking mechanic that bypasses lockers. Imagine the frustration of a survivor that hides in a locker only for the artist, the xenomorph, or the legion to find them instantly. And the game doesn't tell you about the fact that dropping a survivor...
How people still don't understand that the Xenomorph has killer instinct coming out of a tunnel for 12 meters? I find people in lockers a lot. I guarantee they have no clue that character does that. Zero. You know, people get thousands of hours in the game and don't even know that killer instinct goes through lockers. Thousands and thousands of hours. No idea that killer instinct goes through lockers. Isn't that crazy?
Will add some wiggle progress the next time you pick them up. And by the way, remember my gripe with the hook stages I mentioned in the tutorial, how the game doesn't tell you how long each hook stage lasts? Yeah, that is also omitted from the game manual. And by the way, nowhere in this manual does it state that grades have nothing to do with the matchmaking system. And you
I get people sometimes that I play against at my MMR at my 6.1k hours who will like occasionally be like, what? Dude, I'm like silver. How am I facing a guy like you? I'm like, homie, it has nothing to do with matchmaking. It's crazy.
player might think that the better the grade, the better the players will be. But grades are completely independent of the matchmaking system, so this just causes confusion to new players. The fun part is that this is also not explained in the grades section of the game, where I think a disclaimer explaining that grades have nothing to do with matchmaking.
There are people in this comment section that will say it still matters for matchmaking. That you know, circles back around to that one video I made where like, hey, even if we tell you, that's not how that works. Some people just don't want to accept it.
Great and very helpful. And
Flat earthers, man, flat earthers.
Is that behavior is
DBD is full of flat
great at
earthers. This is your
explaining
takeaway.
mechanics of their game outside of the game itself. On their official YouTube channel as well as TikTok, Behavior has done a series of shorts that explain the new mechanics for new players, and they are done in a very to the point and intuitive manner.
Generators can now receive up to 8 regression events, and once those events have been reached, the generator will become blocked and can no longer be damaged.
Let's put those in the game!
These videos are fantastic, which makes me wonder why the game is so poorly explained compared to what they do in their official channel. So, if the tutorials and game manual are bad, how about the last resource players have in order to learn the game, the tooltips in the lobby? If you hover your cursor over a perk, add-on, offering, or power, you will get a description of what those things do. Overall, I don't have much problems with this, and I think the developers have done a pretty good job so far. For example,
good job so
if
far.
you hover over a perk that gives you the haste status effect, it will explain to you what haste is. Add-ons also have this explanation. So,
I think we did a
if
pretty
both
good
perks and
job
add-ons
so
have
far.
this,
There it is.
why don't the killer powers do too?
Good question.
This is where my biggest problems with Dead by Daylight are. The killer powers are not explained in an intuitive and easy access way for beginners. Dead by Daylight is a player versus player competitive game where you as a survivor have to play against the killers in order to win, and there are various killer powers that are completely unintuitive for new players to learn, which most of these times results in beginner survivors to get absolutely demolished in low ranks. There are only 2 ways the game offers you as a new player in order to learn about what a killer has as their power. The first one is if you manually go to each killer in order to read what their power is.
Special map feature, control stations. What's event? What's event? Tunnels? Tunnels, control stations. Tunnels, control stations. At the very, very end of the power.
In order to see their power tooltip. The other way is that for the first times you play against a new killer, during the loading screen, a tooltip...
You know, hindered in general removes your footsteps? Isn't that interesting?
will appear.
They probably just
that will
coded it
tell
that
you
way.
how the powers work.
So like if you apply
But
like
this
force
doesn't
hesitation
happen
or
all the
something,
time.
and then you try to track somebody in a
Xenomorph's
tunnel,
power
it doesn't work.
is too
Very
complex
funny.
to show in a single tooltip. So getting one that says the Xenomorph can tunnel around the map through vents is not useful, since you as a survivor don't know that there are flamethrowers you can use to get Xenomorph out of a special state called crawler mode, where it can attack you with its tail that can bypass low walls and pallets. If you don't know this and the killer is not bad, then you have no chance of surviving. Instead, you have to manually go over a killer power to see what it is. So let's take a look at Xenomorph as a random example. The first section of the power explains that Xenomorph can enter tunnels in order to go around the map faster, detect nearby survivors, and also charge crawler mode faster. Notice how it only says that you can detect nearby survivors, but not how. It doesn't explain that you can see survivor footsteps when they are running, and that if they walk, you no longer detect them. I had
You
no
have to
idea
crouch,
this
yeah.
mode worked way back when the PTB of this killer was first released. It also explains how leaving the tunnels will deactivate the turrets momentarily, which is something that 90% of the player
This is explainable though, because this is just an error on their part, because it used to not do this. Well, it used to do it, but like the turrets were invincible. So there's been an adjustment since then, is what I'm getting at. So maybe that's why.
Doesn't know, since they place their turrets near the tunnel entrances. That's crucial information you need to know as a survivor in order to counter Xenomorph. Again, it talks about Killer Instinct, but it doesn't mention what it is. It later talks about Crawler mode, but all it says is that you get access to a brutal tail attack. It doesn't explain how it works, what the difference is between a basic attack and a tail attack, nor why.
Like, you ever like look at like doctors like Huri, like King and Queen add-ons? It literally just like bleeds off the page. Like, how is that conducive? It's just not. Like, how do they like look at that and go, yeah, that's fine. That totally makes sense.
Just care about it. Killer powers are crucial information that you need to know as a survivor. You might not need to learn every single add-on or every single perk, but I believe that every survivor needs to know how each of the killer powers work, because you as a player have no choice as to which killer you are going against, and your knowledge is also crucial in order to help your 3 teammates escape and have better odds against the killer.
Better odds,
the way
Dara?
the killer powers are explained in the game is not great. Take a look at League of Legends and how each champion's passive and powers are explained as well as visually shown, so players understand how their kit works. And then we have Dead by Daylight's wall of text that doesn't even explain in depth how a killer power works. These texts are okay for killers like the Huntress, who have a simple power, but with killers that are more complex, this wall of text is not enough. An example of this is the Knight, a character that
Knight, oh my gosh.
to track and chase survivors. It mentions their name as well as what they do, but it doesn't tell you how long a hunt lasts with each of the guards, or the fact that the longer your guard summon is, they will detect survivors faster, as well as the game will give you a bit of haste to move around the map faster. This haste is not even mentioned in the Trapper's killer power.
That's so funny.
The game fails to explain how after every trap you set, the Trapper will
Which was an update.
move faster. And let's be completely honest with yourselves. How many of you can explain the power of the Skull Merchant? The worst offenders for me are the killer powers that don't even explain every single aspect of a killer power. I actually learned through my YouTube comments that Wesker's Virulent Bound cooldown is faster the more survivors are infected with the Ouroboros, and only recently I learned that Trickster has an entire combo mechanic that makes the main event
this was
last
recently
longer
about to, yeah.
the better your combo is. And did you know that Singularity's overclock also lasts longer the more survivors are slipstreamed? Yes, I had to test that out myself.
Also, there is a mechanic for biopod, like the slipstream stuff, spreading between survivors as well, which a lot of people don't know about.
Against bots in a custom match, because it's not told anywhere, not even in the power, not in any of the add-ons either. And since we are on the topic of add-ons, let's talk about an actual problem that many new players will have trouble with. If you are a survivor that just got hit by a hillbilly that could bypass the pallet with a chainsaw, you might be wondering how he did that. Was that a cheat? Well, the answer is that it was a very rare add-on that dramatically changes a fundamental part of his power.
Yeah, that would be
Lucky for
nice,
you,
Cassie.
You can check out all the add-ons for Hillbilly in the custom match screen, since all add-ons are unlocked from the start. Unless you got Wesker purchased, you are out of luck, because you can't access and view the add-ons of a killer
That is true,
you did
that
not
sucks.
purchase or grind for.
That sucks,
So
yeah.
even at worst, a new player is not able to learn what the add-ons do for a killer they don't have unlocked. Well, I lied. There is a way to see the add-ons for killers you don't own. All you have to do is wait until the match is completely over in order to see what add-ons the killer was running in your match. You don't want to wait until the match is over? Well, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
The same issue
You're out of
can
luck.
be applied to perks. Since the loadout of the killer is not revealed up until the match is over, if you are a new player that are hit with a niche perk that you had no idea about, like let's say Unforeseen, the newest perk of the unknown, which can be confusing for new players, then the only way you will find out and learn about this perk is either if you wait until the match is over so you can see what perk the killer is using, or go and ask one of your friends about it, because I doubt you will have much luck finding about it in the Dead by Daylight wiki if you can't even describe the effects yourself.
That's funny,
Now,
guys.
obviously, the hidden perks mechanic was introduced in order to counter Survive with Friends helping each other by telling them the perks the killer was running. But in a funny way, this was just a nerf to new players that might want to learn about the perks and add-ons of the killer they played against. I think the absolute perfect solution would be to have a glossary.
I always like little
visually
flourishes and stuff
shows
like that,
how
Prometheus.
each perk and add-on works, like a
When a game
comparison
like uses
of
personality
how
and stuff
fast
like
a
that, I
pallet
think
is
that
broken
stuff
with
is
brutal
neat.
strength compared to default, a video showcasing that Hillbilly's chainsaw will continue after breaking a pallet with low pro chains, how Nemesis zombie speed increases with each add-on.
I see. I do that in the guide too. I'll be like, okay, well, turrets break the xenomorph out in a certain amount of time, unless you're using a certain add-on that either nerfs the range, nerfs the stagger, and gives you more time and power. Like, I'm like, oh, well, this is the case except for this, except for these add-ons. Like, if I can do that, why is it behavior?
These are just examples, but a glossary system that showcases every single perk and add-on, even if you
is
don't
this
have the
wrong?
killer
Where's
unlocked,
the lie?
would help new players in an insane way. It just doesn't make sense that a competitive player versus player game hides information about the in-game mechanics and you have to enter the Dead by Daylight wiki in order to find out about basic stuff. This is the only competitive game that I have played where I have to enter the wiki in order to learn about how certain mechanics work, which is ridiculous in my opinion. I never had to touch the wiki for Rainbow Six Siege or League or Valorant. I find it odd that Dead by Daylight
Arc
is also
shot
one of the
on
only
controller
games
on Switch.
where
Let's
the
go.
backstory of a character
Good
takes
stuff, friend.
more importance than their killer power and statistics. Take a look at how massive the wall of backstory of any character except some licensed ones is compared to how small the killer tooltip is. Even in the cosmetic store, the side where players who didn't unlock the killers will have access to, the lore is massive, whereas the killer power is hidden and you have to manually search for it. Imagine if in Valorant, instead of the game explaining to you what Omen does, you get a massive wall of text explaining his backstory and you have to manually search for his powers in order to see that he can smoke and blind the enemies. And I believe I know the reason as to why this game is so poorly explained, and that's because the devs actually want it that way. Dead by Daylight is marketed as a horror game after all, so the mystery and suspense of not knowing who you're going against and what their power is actually fits perfectly with a horror game. Many gamers can agree that knowing how a killer works takes away from the scare factor of facing them. The issue is that the time of DBD being a horror game is long gone, and it is now a competitive game.
Like what, like, I think the solution to this would be expand upon a system that's already in the game. Like when you're like new to facing a killer, you get told in the menu what the killer is and like just a very brief explanation of like who they are and what they do. Maybe we could expand upon that, and like after you face them like the first time, there's also tool tips as well. Like that way, if there's a little bit of clarification after your experience as well.
So there is no point in hiding information to the players when you can just
decide not to decide. True.
Or view guides.
Yeah, I like how you got the turret invincibility bug in your B-roll. That's so funny.
Be told by how the killer power works.
That's been in the game since the PTB, by the way.
You already have hours and
Pixie!
hours
Hi, Fred.
invested.
How are you?
I think it's pretty clear by now that Dead by
How's your
Daylight
stream
is
go?
one of
How's
the
your stream go?
least intuitive competitive video games in the market. If you think that this entire half an hour was just me ranting about a useless topic in the game, and that the solution
that's what I do.
is
That's
to
my
just
job.
shut up and watch content creators for 50 hours or get a friend to explain the game to you, then
that's good.
take a
I'm
look
glad.
at the kill rates the devs have shown us on December of 2023.
Yep. Most of these kill rates are because either a killer is too autopilot or extremely pub stompy. Sonico can be extremely pub stompy. Cenobite, Pinhead can be extremely pub stompy. Freddy is literally one of the worst characters in the game. How does he have such a high kill rate? Like Pig, another great example. Someone else that's like not a great character, but like excels a lot. It's so wild.
You can clearly see that the killers with the highest kill rate are those that have convoluted powers that a new player will find extremely hard to play against. And anyone seeing this,
I said afterwards, Tino, not before every single game.
No strong killer is. Where is the
I said
blind?
afterwards.
Where is the nurse? This is a problem that the game suffers from, which is why I put so much importance
of highest higher
regarding
priority
this.
for updates. Yeah, it's because that's all behavior cares about: stats and numbers. That's what they care about the most: stats and numbers.
First point,
They follow
all
those
I am
to a
saying
fault.
is that if this game had a good tutorial and explanation for beginners, the $350,000 tournament fiasco wouldn't have happened. In my personal opinion, a game that requires
I remember
you
one of the things of that tournament too is that they were mad because somebody had a coach and they were just like doing so much better than everybody else. Or everybody else was just like floundering and had no idea what was happening.
to watch Oddsdarva seminars in order to have a chance at winning and understanding what is going on cannot be called a casual game.
Yeah, it was among a
But
bunch
this
of like
is
really
just
huge
one of
streamers
the
fire and it
issues
was a
that
disaster.
new players face
It was
when
around
they
the
start
Sadako
playing
chapter, I
Dead by
think,
Daylight.
back then.
Let's talk
That's
about
what
the
it was.
grind.
Around the era.
If you thought that the in-game tutorials of Dead by Daylight are bad, then we haven't even scratched the top of the iceberg yet. One of the reasons as to why so many players drop Dead by Daylight during the first month they play is thanks to the abhorrent and absurdly insane grind that you are forced to endure if you want to have any chance at having any fun in Dead by Daylight, especially if you're playing by yourself. When you start playing Dead by Daylight, you have 7 survivors and 5 killers to
At least
play
the survivors
with
are good
if you
teachables.
bought the game on PC. If you play on console, you also get Feng Min, the Doctor, Ace Visconti, and the Hag. Switch players also get Kate, the Clown, Adam, and Spirit.
I didn't know
But
that.
for the sake of this video, we are going to ignore Switch players entirely.
Woo!
And since
Heck,
the
Switch
vast
players.
majority of casual players are found
You'd be better off
in the
playing on a
console
fridge.
versions of the game, we will count the 4 extra characters as part of base kit, just to make this video consistent. So, a beginner will have 9 survivors and 7 killers to play with. So already, from the start, the survivor side, 82% of the content is locked, out of
Excuse me.
which 36% is locked behind a paywall. For killers, 85%
Killers
of the
starting
content
teachables are
is
terrible
locked,
though.
out of which
like
37%
barely
is
anything worth
locked
using.
behind a paywall. Now, lucky for us, Behavior has done an insane change that benefits new players dramatically, as now all the old content costs half of the original price. This means that the grind is effectively cut in half. If you remember my monetization video, where I talked for 50 minutes over how unfair the monetization and grind of the game was, I said that it would take 735 hours of pure gameplay
Which is
in order
absurd.
to unlock all unlicensed characters in Dead by Daylight. Since then, the grind now takes 368 hours in order to unlock all
Still
of the
bad, but,
characters
like, way
mentioned
better.
in that video, and 210 hours in order to unlock the unlicensed characters released in 2023 as of the release of this video. Remember that this is only for the unlicensed characters. But I don't want to bore you with math, as my old video is enough. Instead, let's focus on beginners and how stupid the perk system is for this game. Dead by Daylight's perk system was designed in order to give some variety to the matches. Originally, the game was released with 12 teachable survivor perks, 3 for each survivor, and 14 general perks that are unlocked by default. For the killer side, killers had 9 teachable perks and 11 general perks. Nowadays,
What
Dead
about
by
lieutenant
Daylight has
perks instead of general perks?
231 teachable perks. And
Gosh.
can you guess how many general perks have been added since then? 2. Only 2.
That's
general
so
perks.
bad. Oh, it's
Those
so
being the
bad.
perks Thrill of the
Only
Hunt
2 for
and
killer?
Shattered
Oh my
Hope,
gosh.
both for killers. So
Oh,
the
that's awful.
absurdly vast majority of the perks in this game are locked behind a grind
That's
of
terrible.
either 17 hours if they are old characters, 35 hours if they are new characters, locked behind a paywall if they are licensed, or locked behind an archaic system called the Scam of Secrets, which
The Scam of
completely
Secrets.
pisses me off that nobody is talking about how truly bad this system is. Not to mention,
somebody said this to me in one of the commentary videos I put out when I was making a similar point. They were like, "Oh, well, there's the Shrine of Secrets. Did you just forget about that? Just get the perk from the Shrine of Secrets, you dummy." Gosh, content creators are so negative, and it's like, I don't know if you knew this, but Flashbang, when the Resident Evil chapter came out, the Flashbang Leon's perk, that didn't come out in the Shrine for like a year. I forget the exact number, but it was like a year, and it never hit the Shrine. What's the explanation for that? What if I wanted Flashbang? Time issue. Yeah, if you want Flashbang, that's just waiting that long. Like, holy moly! I understand not putting like brand new chapters perks like straight in the Shrine right away, so you can like kind of collect the income from, or the profit from the new chapter and trying to get people to buy it. But like, here, holy moly!
the general perks we have in the game, for the most part, are absolute trash. So if
Soul Guard has never been the Shrine at all. Yeah, what do you do if you just want Soul Guard?
For good characters in order to make
yeah, what do you do if you want Soul Guard?
Build. The issue with the perk system is that it affects both sides.
License perks, you can't grind for it. What do you do?
For survivors, since
Checkmate,
everyone
atheists.
is just a skin, you can just grind for one build and run it with whoever you want for the rest of your gameplay hours. The free survivors you get in the beginning also come with great perks, like Feng Min's Life perk, Deja Vu, Kindred, or Meg's Adrenaline perk. That's a solid build that you can make almost at the start of the game. For survivors, the only issue is that in order to get teachable perks, you have to prestige either Meg or Feng Min, and in order to do so, you have to earn blood points, which is painfully slow at the beginning because you don't have any double blood point offerings and you rely on either playing during an event like the Blood Moon or Anniversary, or rely on your friends stacking blood point offerings just to make things easier for new players. What makes it worse is that if you don't have any friends to do that, there is a high chance you will end up dying in your first matches, and Survivor's blood point gain is miserable if you die really quick. Not to mention the amount of absolutely useless items, offerings, and add-ons that you will be forced to purchase in order to continue leveling up your character.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm a DBD content creator. Oh my gosh, background player Silver 2 Nerfing right now!
Are trash. So this just leads to a boring, unfun, and unrewarding experience for all players. What makes this perk system of teachables even more unfun
2.5 years?
completely sets
Oh my
players to
gosh.
fail from the start. If any
That's
of the
ridiculous.
new perks are designed with new players in mind, then no one is going to use them besides the adept, because by the time a new player already unlocks those perks, they will have significantly better options in their loadout. As such, perks like Visionary from Felix, Corrective Action from Jonah, Rookie Spirit from Leon, or the newest boom perk, Illumination from Alan Wake, they all suck, since the players that would benefit from them the most, new players, won't need those perks by the time they unlock or pay for those characters. Then we have weak, dumb perks that again nobody will use because they are just worse than the perks new players have. Using Alan Wake, the newest licensed survivor as an example, he has Deadline, which
Deadline's
is
good with
just a bad
autodidact.
perk. So outside from an adept, no new survivor is going to
Well, I
want
guess
to
no.
get or grind for this perk. But the problem is that if behavior makes good perks, then we go back to the issue that newer players are at a huge disadvantage, which is very problematic when band-aid solutions are only offered through licensed perks. Decisive Strike is one of the best
I made a video about this, yeah.
along with
I made a video
Off
about
the
this.
Record. But Decisive is a licensed perk,
Pay
so
well,
you
pay
either
well.
pay for Laurie Strode or you wait for it in the Scam of Secrets. The same
Scam
can
of
be
Secrets.
said about Reassurance, a fantastic perk that helps quite a lot with one of the problems newer survivors suffer from, proxy camping. Yet again, this perk is locked behind a paywall or the Scam of Secrets.
I love
This
that you
is
call
also
that.
elevated by the skill-based matchmaking introduced in Dead by Daylight. One of the most common tactics killer players do at the start of the match is to tunnel out the weak link from the match to make the game a 3 versus 1. And if you played with a new friend before, you would know how bad the experience is when you play well and the killer completely ignores you in order to go for your inexperienced friend. The problem is that the perks that will help you in this situation are Off the Record, which is locked behind a paywall, or Decisive Strike, which again is behind a license.
And before somebody in the future YouTube comments like, actually, you can just grind for it. Zarina's not licensed, so you can grind for it. I know, but that's pay for access. That is still bad. Pay for access is still egregious as well. Okay, I'm gonna put that little "notice me, pick me" hat right on your head. There you go. Awesome. Do you feel noticed? You feel noticed now? Yeah, we know. There you go. Paying for access is still a paywall, okay?
Paywall. All the perks that help with tunneling are not accessible for newer players. So, in the end, we reach the conclusion that Dead by Daylight's teachable perk is a complete lose-lose situation.
DBD has made the game competitive, yeah, but it's not like a willing choice. Like, we didn't all get together in a town hall and be like, okay, now we're gonna sweat. It's just like, over time, we've played the game for so long that we've learned what's good and what's not, and honestly, and I'm one of these people, like, doing things efficiently is fun. Their entire game's built off of just doing things efficiently. Like Factorio, great example. So some games are built just to give your brain the dopamine for doing something efficiently. So that's just like the natural course of a game, is that people eventually figure out what's efficient to do, and because efficiency feels good on the brain, you just do the efficient thing more often. We didn't get together at a town hall and be like, okay, now we're going to take this game seriously. That's not what happened. It just kind of happened naturally over time.
New players. Either the perks are designed for new players in mind, but only veterans or invested players can get access without paying, or the perks are very strong, but they are locked behind.
They wanted you to hide more, Sko, and just not gonna chase it all.
Rendering new players at a disadvantage. For killers, this is a completely different
Windows and PALs should just be like a last resort.
I talked about it in my monetization video.
Not like the main gameplay loop.
Killers are all different, that means that some perks will naturally synergize with some killers more than the rest. If you want to experiment and have fun, you are forced to grind for it or buy them. Just take a look at the most searched terms for Dead by Daylight, and you will see that one of the most asked questions in YouTube is, which killer should I buy first?
If you want the answer to that, Artist, Clown, and Cenobite. Those are probably your best three.
Now compare these to Operators in Rainbow and Agents in Valorant, and take a look at how only in Dead by Daylight the word first is specified significantly more than on the two other games. This is because already by default, if you want to have any chance at the higher MMR, which I doubt,
yeah, ideally the mix of both is great.
Even reach, you must buy various killers.
I don't see the party aspects of this game as a threat. I don't see the competitive aspects of this game as a threat. I like the mixture of both. I like how it can be zany, but also getting good in writing skill curves matters. With DBD players, which should be no surprise, most DBD players want one or the other, and there's no in between.
Can't only main one of them. Plague has Corrupt Intervention, Cenobite has Deadlock, Nemesis has Lethal
Nemesis is another good one, yeah.
Xenomorph has Ultimate Weapon, Chucky
and Rapid's got a
Steel
lot of killers
Those
too.
Those are only one of the 3 teachable perks that each killer has, and everything is locked behind a 35 hours or 17 hours grind, depending on how old the killers are, or behind a paywall if they are licensed, and that's brutal for new players. What is
yeah, but by that logic, Spongy, we should just never have ranked mode in any game ever, because there will be people who sit in casual and sweat. Just never have ranked mode ever. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's still going to be people that only like to play sweaty who will only play ranked mode. That's where they'll hang out. That's where they'll stay. To never ever do ranked ever in any game just because you're afraid of people who are going to take advantage of the system means that we would never have the system at all, because that's just going to happen. I mean, and it's already happening. DBD's one game mode is casual mode. DBD's one game mode is a casual mode. This is already happening. That's the whole reason we're even having the conversation to begin with. So we already have the problem that you're worried about. So I'm not sure what people are scared of.
Is that, objectively speaking, the best perks for killers are locked behind a paywall. According to Oddsdara's perk tier list, which I will just use to show an example since it's pretty accurate. 6 of the best perks in the game are locked behind a licensed paywall, and 9 of them are locked behind grinds for
oh, it puts agitation in very good.
The only good
rep.
perks
Love
you
agitation.
can get from the start are No One Escapes Death and Sloppy Butcher, both of which do not work with certain characters that have special attacks. And this is where the huge problem with perks comes from. Dead by Daylight is not the only game that has entire characters locked behind a paywall.
Sounds like a
Fighter
Fairy Fountain
games
remix.
like Guilty
Pretty well,
Gear
though.
or Super Smash Bros. Also have characters locked behind paywalls, but those characters exist in a vacuum, so if you didn't pay for Testament in Guilty Gear, you only miss out on them. Whereas in Dead by Daylight, if you don't have access to the Xenomorph, you cannot get Ultimate Weapon, which is one of the best, if not the best tracking perk, even post its nerf.
Yeah, even post nerf.
I think the biggest outlier
It doesn't-
and best
it doesn't
proof that
force
the
people
perk
to
system
scream, and so
implemented
distortion
in
works
Dead by
against it,
Daylight doesn't
but
care
it's more
about new
accurate
players
information
at
when it
all.
does go
Is
off.
the general perk introduced with the Dredge called Shattered Hope. This perk, which
Yeah, I
all
wish Surge would stay
beginners will
general.
unlock at
I
the
agree.
start, only
Absolutely agree.
affects boon totems, a mechanic that is locked behind a grind or behind a paywall, since no free survivor comes with a boon perk. This means that beginner killer players get to unlock a perk that only
It's
works
useless.
with DLC content, which makes absolutely no sense. Why not make a general boon perk for new survivors? I think Alan Wake's boon is great for beginners.
Is
since
that so
it's
bad?
trash for
Is that
anyone
why?
that has played enough. Killers need good perks in order to compete against the best caliber of survivors. Anyone
No
who
caliber?
thinks you don't has never played against strong survivors that know what they are doing and run the absolute best. You can win, of course, but you would have to compensate for the lack
If you
of
like taking
perks
gens that
with
much,
an
you should run Eruption of
insane
Lethal.
amount of skill, and you
I know you
won't
watched
be
me.
winning
I know
all
you
your
watched these
matches.
videos.
The same is applied
That'd be a
for
better build.
survivors. You
So
need
you're
good
already
perks
kicking a lot
in order
with the
to
extra
play
umph.
against the best killers.
that
Survivor
right now? I'm not
friends
sure.
that have
Grim
access
reacts.
to the perk for the people and buckle up, the latter being a paid perk by the way, have a competitive advantage over a team who doesn't, and
Played
it's
each other, I
that
see.
simple. With the way the aggressive MMR
So you ordered 'cause
system
of
is
Shattered Hope?
implemented,
Ah,
if
really?
you don't have good builds, you will
Interesting.
eventually reach a peak
The
where
origin
you
story reveals
constantly
itself.
get
That's
demolished
interesting.
by players
I'd
that
forgotten
simply
that.
have access to better perks than you do. So good luck competing against Pain Resonance, Pop Goes the Wizard,
Renaissance.
Growth Intervention, and No Way Out with your Sloppy Butcher, Brutal Strength, Deer Stalker, and Spies from the Shadows build. The
I know,
Dead by
Spies on the
Daylight
Shadows
perk
slept on.
system is
Heck
outdated,
me!
and a unique
Heck me!
problem that
I'm
only
special!
affects this game.
I'm a
Since
special
I don't
person
know of
because I
any
believe
other
that Spies in
competitive
the Shadows
experience
is
that
underrated.
requires you to unlock paywall characters first in order to make your
Whisper
free
still good
characters
2024.
better. And the worst part
Really put two
is
turrets
that
together, that's really
nobody
good for them.
talks about how horrible
Yeah, you're
this
gonna have to take
system
a lot of
is
time to do this,
because
unfortunately.
It doesn't matter for
Yeah.
most of us.
She should have made
Though,
distance while that was
the majority
happening.
of players that enjoy my content or that play Dead by Daylight are veterans. Players who either already have everything they wanted and don't care about new perks, or players that
See, when you
simply
strafed
pay
with your
for the
body, it was a lot
DLCs
better
on
shot
day
than when you were
one.
trying to aim with your
If you
camera.
have paid
Sorry.
for the DLCs
Um,
each time
Xeno
they come
gameplay.
out,
I'll
you
zoom
won't
back into the
mind
conversation.
paying $5 to get Chucky. But if you just started playing now, and you saw that you have to spend at least $200 in order to get all the content, then I bet you won't like that as a player. The worst insult is that Behavior just recently updated the cosmetic store, which included a visual overhaul of the Scam of Secrets.
Yeah, but
Now,
Secrets,
it does look prettier, that's true, but no matter how much glitter you put on shit, it's still shit. After almost 8 years of being live, the Scam of Secrets still is the same exact trash system as how it was way back in the beginning in 2016, which is baffling for me. By this point, the Scam
This has
of
been the
Secrets
longest
should
section of
straight
this
up
video
be a
almost.
perk
The
selection
Survivor
store,
tutorial.
where you can purchase any perk you want at any point in time. And I see no argument as to why this shouldn't be the case. All perks are unlocked for free in custom matches, so why do new players and beginners have to wait for a 2% each week in order to get whatever perk they want? I'll tell you why. It's just another way of FOMO. If the Scam of Secrets had a rework, it would considerably help with new players and casuals overall, and it would single-handedly be by far the best change that would help the casual side of the game. No more boring grinding just for one meta perk that could be nerfed in the next patch. No more paying for content only because the perk you want didn't release for months in the Scam of Secrets. all perks should be available at all times, period. And paywalling perks, which are gameplay altering features, is by
I do like that
all
they call it
means
skin
a
secrets,
pay
yeah.
to win practice, and nobody in this community can change my mind on this. So, the overall conclusion from this video is that Dead by Daylight's tutorial is terrible and teaches new players bad habits that are detrimental to their experience. The game manual lacks crucial information that can only be found by third-party means or the hard way. The perk system in Dead by Daylight is not well designed for new players, and it makes the vast majority of perks doomed from the start. And the game features pay-to-win elements, as players that pay get a competitive advantage over players that do not pay. I hope this video was enough to show you just how bad the experience for new players is and can be if they don't have any friends to help them with. After all, I don't consider Dead by Daylight to be a casual game, as I cannot imagine a father of 2 daughters coming back home from work and booting up a casual match of Survivor and actually enjoying it, because the amount of knowledge and investment you need in order to play this game is so high that even 250 hours invested is still considered beginner level.
I agree, and I agree with this straight.
You can finish Elden Ring or The Witcher in less than the amount of time it would take you to become a beginner in this game. That's just crazy for me. Please let me know about your experience.
I think one of the things that I find really interesting and what I like the most about this video is that usually the new player experience being terrible is blamed on other players. The new player experience is often blamed on sweaty killers or sweaty survivors. Oh, well, you're taking me to the meatpacking plant with background player and forcing pallet stones on me, and you're ruining the new player experience for me. Or, you know, on the flip side, you know, you're running a pop, pin, res, bamboozle, and dead man switch all together. That's 3 slowdown and an anti-chase perk. You're ruining the experience for me. It's always like me. It's always like me versus you. It's like behavior doesn't enter the conversation at all most times. The structure of the game does not enter the conversation most times. I think it's way more healthy if we do direct our attention to how bad the grind and the communication on what Dead by Daylight actually is to new players is, instead of just like blaming each other all the time. That's how we end up just going in circles essentially nonstop. We're just like, oh, well, it's the killers that are ruining the new player experience. Oh, it's the sweaty survivors ruining the new player experience. It's like, no, it's a lot of it is just that it's presented poorly to, like, the game itself presents it poorly to new players. Behavior doesn't do much to help new players, and even when they do, it's not in the game itself. There's a lot just in the DNA of the game that makes it rough for new players. So it's about time we stop blaming each other and blaming the players. We're just, you know, taking advantage and enjoying the things that are the tools that are made available to them, and start thinking about what the tools are and how the tools themselves can be improved. So